I very seldom managed to work well with a group of people. I don't know why. After all the attention I've given to verbal behavior, I haven't done more of this, but I never felt that I really taught a seminar well, with one exception, and that was when I was in Indiana. I had a seminar going on the subject of self-control, and I had people just bring in examples of how people control themselves, and we analyzed them. It was a very profitable thing, and I worked that into this chapter in Science and Human Behavior on self-control. Then I began to think more about this, and I remember I was invited once to go out to Mount Holyoke and lecture, and the title was Self-Control. And there was a mob of students came, and I began by saying, I hope this didn't mean there was any particular need at Mount Holyoke for self-management. It's a very important point, I think, and the fact that, so far as I know, no other textbook than mine has a chapter on self-control shows how it's been neglected. But that's because I think, well, it's because I think people think that you have to control yourself through willpower or something of that kind. So hence it would be out of the science. And but that, my whole point is that you control yourself by controlling the environment. And in other words, you control yourself as you control other people. And as a matter of fact, I think it's quite clear that that is the case. Self-control is simply a special case of the control of human behavior. With problem children or problem people, let's say juvenile delinquents, they have shown a hesitation in responding to the normal social contingencies. They've just not responded to them. So you have to build something rather explicit. And this is true also of problem children, which of course are what this particular film is about. You begin with a child who is badly disturbed, and the normal, natural reinforcers just are not making any headway at all. And the temptation then is to use punishment, which is also a contrived consequence, to try to correct the behavior. But you can do a much better job if you use a conspicuous, positive reinforcer, and that is actually what has been done in the two experiments.
Jimmy is an 11-year-old boy admitted to UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute because of severe behavioral problems at school and at home.
Okay, now, can you stand up and take your shirt off for us? Why? Because we want to see how your back muscles work while you're doing the exercise. Can you do that? You gonna take your shirt off? Jimmy? Want me to help you take your shirt off? Let me help you, okay? Can you do it? Sit. Jim? No! Jim? Come on, let's take your shirt off. No! Come on, Jim. No! 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 Please! Oh, oh, Hey, wait a minute. Okay, you want to sit down?
Could you kind of summarize a little bit in your own words exactly what brought you to bring Jimmy here?
Well, we didn't know that we were going to come here. Mm-hmm. Because his behavior got so bad, I went to my doctor, and my doctor recommended me to a pediatrician, and they sent me to Children's Hospital Regional Center. And through examination, and because we were so fed up and just, gave up, they asked for an appointment here. Mm-hmm. So we had no idea where we were going to end up.
What were your major problems that really made you look for help?
Well, we were beyond controlling him anymore. We didn't know what to do, It was
he put his hand through
too deep for us, It was upsetting the whole family.
He wasn't happy. There was no good at all. Nothing that made him happy.
Actually, what we were looking for when we came here was a place to put him permanently. Just eliminate him from the family.
Because he was dangerous to everybody. He jumped out of cars, threw things, and I mean like dangerous items. He hit his brother with hammers, screwdrivers, you know, rocks,
Whatever he got his hands on at the time.
and no pattern. Just
What have you done to try to control some of these behaviors?
at the end, try to beat him to death.
The normal type things, a lot of punishment, a lot of whippings, you know, taking away things, and this type of thing.
But there was no. What happens is then your home breaks up.
Barbara, Jimmy's been in the hospital now about 7 days. Could you give us some idea of what you've observed of his behavior since he's been here?
I think the nursing staff seems to feel that his temper tantrums are uncontrollable, and his pouting behavior, and he's expressed a feeling that he wants to be able to control being angry.
What kind of things have you noticed on the ward that seem to precede the pouting or the temper tantrums? Have you come up with anything?
Most of the time, there's not anything that seems to be setting the temper tantrum off. You could be asking him a question, asking him to do something, to go somewhere, or just no apparent reason for the temper tantrum.
He's super sensitive to any innuendo.
Yeah, he doesn't like to do something.
He's
And when
afraid
he's
of these
asked
situations.
what made him upset, he really can't answer. He can't express himself. He'll fold his hands and walk away and pout.
But then later on, he can sometimes tell you what it was that started him.
But it might be something as insignificant as a tuna fish sandwich served for lunch, which he didn't like.
Now, have you given any consideration to the types of reinforcers and the system of reinforcement to use with Jimmy?
I think what Jimmy might be able to handle is some type of tangible reinforcer, like a token system, where he could have chips to use for not pouting, for increasing the table manners and the appropriate play. I think he needs something tangible.
Okay. Jimmy, we talked about your temper tantrums, and you said that you wanted to have some way to control your temper tantrums, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, well, we think that maybe you could be on a token system. Do you know what that is?
Following the initial planning conference, a behavioral therapy program was outlined which involved the definition of target behaviors to be altered, the strategy for baseline acquisition, and the actual intervention protocol. The first priority for behavioral change was a reduction in pouting and temper tantrums and an increase in cooperative play. Because of Jimmy's inability to delay gratification, his behavior was monitored on an hourly basis and, if appropriate, was rewarded with an immediate secondary reinforcer in the form of tokens accompanied by social approval. Tokens could later be exchanged for backup rewards of his own choosing, such as tinker toy play, trips into town with staff, and weekend home visits.
If you set this clock for 7 o'clock, then we can watch the clock out there, and by the time it's 8 o'clock and you haven't pouted, then you can earn 1 chip. Okay? So you'll have to be responsible for setting a clock. Okay?
Okay.
And you can earn chips by not pouting for an hour. And you can start earning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you can earn 1 each hour until you go to bed at night. And we can use this clock to tell when the time is up. And you can set the clock on the hour. And you can start in the morning at 7. And then you can reset it each hour according to the clock in the hall.
Okay.
And then you can remind me, and you can get 1 chip for each hour.
All right, now the question comes up about the time, the time segments that time samples that we take during the course of the day.
I wanted to expect high frequency and good and maladaptive behavior, though, too. So I think there are several periods in the morning and several around lunchtime, because school should take up the afternoon time.
Before the program was put into action, a great deal of patient explanation was necessary to get Jimmy to the point where he could help define his own programs and participate in their modification. Since Jimmy verbally indicated his wish to change his behavior, the intervention strategies were developed with him in the form of a contract with the ultimate goal of self-regulation.
Sweatshirt? Good.
What, bye?
Do you have your chips?
No. No, I don't have any.
Oh, you can't go if you don't have your chips.
No.
However, predictably enough, despite his willingness to participate in the treatment, Jimmy almost immediately began to test the program.
Okay, Jim, I want you to sit on the chair. Okay, calm down. Do you think you can sit quietly?
Do you think this boy, on the basis of what you know to date, is a candidate for self-regulation at some point in time?
I think definitely that he is.
What kind of things make you think that?
Because he's able to tell you when he's been pouting. He knows that he wants to stop pouting, and he knows that his pouting almost always causes him to have a tantrum. And I think he feels like he loses control when he does have a tantrum.
He's even said, you know, I want to control my behavior, that's why I'm in here.
Jim, the one that your parents bought?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see the numbers on the timer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are almost like the numbers on the clock, except that they're set for 15 minutes, and 30 minutes, and 45 minutes, and 60 minutes.
What are these?
Well, that's part of the alarm. Okay, turn it like this to turn it on.
After 2 weeks on the program, Jimmy's temper tantrums decreased significantly, and he began to play more often with other children. Therefore, it was decided to begin self-administered intervention and reinforcement. Because of his limited notion of time, he was given a self-timing buzzer which he could reset after each 1-hour period. The behaviors which he had to monitor required differentiation between adaptive and non-adaptive social interaction, specifically interactive play, and ways of expressing aggression.
You put one on now. Put it over there. Keep building. Nice, build this. Come on, put it on. Just get one and put it on.
Okay, Jim, it's time to mark your chart now.
Following each 1-hour period of successful performance, Jimmy marked his own chart and then asked the nurse for his token.
Okay, and here's your chip.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19.
When he had earned a sufficient number of tokens, they could be exchanged for one of a number of rewards which had been agreed upon ahead of time. One of his favorites was being allowed to play with Tinker toys. Jimmy's therapy was moving well in the hospital, therefore the next essential step was to employ the resources of the parents and move the program into the home. Because of the negative feelings engendered in the family by Jimmy's behavior, a considerable effort was required to alter the parents' attitudes and interactions with him.
But I think that as they see him improving and getting more control over himself, that they're going to change their attitudes too. So I'm in the process of meeting with them, talking about that, talking about what we're going to do with him. And I've been thinking about that group that you all have for parents on behavior modification.
I think they'd be excellent parents to have in the group.
Very
So
good.
they could learn some of the principles and stuff.
Very good.
Right, and have a chance to practice, too.
Because we're really interested in having them carry out the program.
Burgers, and we ended up having pizza. And he ran away.
Yeah, he decided he didn't want any.
But we went on and we had our pizza and he didn't get anything.
He just came back
We
in and
ignored
sat
him.
down and waited. Never said a word, never bothered anybody, where 6 months ago he'd have kicked chairs over and stomped through the place and upset all the other customers, you know.
Yeah, but now he just...
Now he just come in and sat down. He decided, he made a decision that he'd rather have hamburgers, and he felt we should.
And he knows when he does this that he loses out. It's automatic. You don't have to tell him. I mean, what we're all going to have, he's going to have, and if he don't do it, then he just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew this, and it was fine, because we just went on about our business.
We feel Jimmy has made a considerable amount of progress, and we are now looking forward to the time when he will be discharged. I think you've gotten a lot of help in terms of the parent group, in terms of helping to understand his problem. The nurses have given you a lot of assistance. How do you feel about this possibility now, him being home and you're having to take care of most of the part of yourself now?
Real good now.
We've learned a lot. We've changed.
It makes you more aware of what you're doing on a daily basis or an hourly basis instead of just doing something. You know, no professional parents.
We've learned new discipline, action, where we thought we were doing it right before. We learned the better way to do it.
Well, it makes you realize that you're not the smartest people in the world. Someone else does have the answers.
Once you get the hang
So you
of
all
it,
have
you
learned
really-
them.
Well, yeah, we've learned them, but we couldn't have learned them unless someone else was there to teach us.
It takes time, and before you know it, you're into it, and you've done it, and you've succeeded at it.
We've showed you some of the graphs showing how much he's improved. Have you felt that he's improved too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, his graphs at home would be a 95% now.
Yeah, no, it's real good. And he self-controls himself with a timer, and you can see where he would get mad before he now thinks about it, and he succeeds. So he's done a good job.
That's exactly what you do when you control someone else's behavior, and hence it's the thing that you teach the child to do, to observe his own behavior. Then certain contingencies are set up so that a record of a certain kind is indeed reinforced, and not just by avoiding punishment. And that is what is done. And the child does not, in a sense, actually reinforce himself, but he makes a clear record of his behavior, which makes it ready for reinforcement or worthy and deserving of reinforcement, and then the system actually steps in and reinforces it. You want the child to begin to reinforce his own behavior, and he begins to manage himself.
This is David's house. David is a 7-year-old boy who has just been referred to the Child Development Center of the Fuller Graduate School of Psychology in Pasadena. David is coming to the center because of a number of behavioral problems, which include frequent temper tantrums. Most of the time he is in motion. He has a great deal of physical aggression and provocative behavior toward his peers and toward his sister. He easily gives up on difficult tasks. He has a short attention span. He's slow to comply with the request of adults, and he fails to complete many classroom assignments. In general, he has great difficulties with his peers. Both David's mother and his teacher are very frustrated in dealing with him. Feeling helpless and hopeless, she came to the Child Development Center.
Tell him to do something. He doesn't respond. In other words, if I tell him to go to bed, I mean, it's always a hassle first.
He's slow to comply with your request.
I'm not.
It's his
I'll
sister.
just be fine.
Switches the TV when she's watching.
Switches TV.
I tell him to do something. A lot of times he storms off to his bedroom.
Kind of tantruming.
Kicking on the way.
Tantrums. Does he yell at the same time?
Oh, yes, he yells.
Yells, kicks, slams doors.
Oh, yes. Very good at slamming doors.
The treatment program with David will begin by training his mother how to observe and keep track of his own behavior. After she's learned to do that, she'll be trained to carry out specific therapeutic interventions designed to bring about the kinds of changes in David's behavior that she would like. What else?
I don't like this. Cut it out. No!
All right.
Ow!
Enough. No more. Teresa, sit down. Come on.
For at least 1 week, the mother will track David's behavior without changing any of her ways of handling him. In fact, she's been specifically instructed to treat him the way she always has, but to begin keeping track very carefully of each and every time that he engages in any physical aggression or provocative behavior, and also to keep track of each 5 minutes of time he spends doing homework. We can see that David's behavior varied quite a bit during the baseline week, during which you just followed your old procedures. And during the first week of intervention, where he was able to get his start in the day. After gathering 1 week of baseline data and carrying out the therapeutic interventions for 1 week, Mrs. Norwood comes into the center to review how well she's doing. And it seemed to make quite a difference. You've done a good job of carrying out the intervention and not attending to his provoking and his fighting and so on. I've written out the instructions that we agreed on for the week of baseline. I'll give these to you and have you take these home. You copy them down and then bring my copy back to me next week so that I can have it for my files. So I'll give these to you. And I'll give you 2 more behavior graphs to keep track of the provocative behavior and the... After Mrs. Norwood had gathered baseline data on David for a week, she and Dr. Clement agreed to the following plan. David would get a star on a piece of paper and 5 cents for each day his total score for physical aggression and provocative behavior was less than 6. Also, his sister, Teresa, would receive a nickel each time David earned a nickel for good behavior. Reading and writing practice would be scored for each 5 minutes he spent without getting told. And he would earn 5 minutes of extra time up beyond 8 o'clock in the evening. He could save this time to spend at some later date, but he could not purchase more than an extra hour for any school night. Here's the baseline week, and we can see that David was averaging about 6 provocations a day during baseline. And the intervention was introduced, and for the first 2 weeks of intervention, he dropped down. Then we lowered the hurdle, and you started haggling with him, and he started haggling back with you, and he got steadily worse for that week. Then we stopped the haggling, and he dropped down immediately, and was doing very well until we returned to the baseline conditions. Stopped giving him the star and the nickel in the day, and started responding to him each time he would provoke, and he jumped back up again. Then we reintroduced the interventions, and gradually he was coming down. And I think we're at the point now where we can try to begin training David systematically to regulate his own behavior. I gather that this is a level that is much more acceptable than it was before. And it'd be a lot easier and more profitable in the long run if we can teach David how to be in charge of himself. We decided that it was time to start having David come to the center with his mother so that I could train him to regulate his own behavior. David, we've been talking today and last week about how you can learn to control your own behavior. And you know that at home, you and your mom have talked about not fighting so much with Teresa and not doing things that make everybody mad at you at home. And some of the kinds of things that we've talked about before that you do that make people mad are like, hitting and kicking and pushing, or touching others when they don't want you to like that, or turning the TV set. Here's what I want you to do. I got a special counter. I bet you never saw one like this before. And I'm going to let you take this home. David is being trained to continue modifying the same behaviors that his mother has been working on in the preceding weeks. The way that this is going to be done is he will be asked to keep track of his own provocative behaviors by scoring himself on a golf score counter which he'll wear on his wrist every 15 minutes of the day. And whenever it dings, when the timer goes ding, if you've been behaving well and not bothering Teresa or your mom or dad, not fighting, since the last time the timer went ding, then you press the button. Press it and see what happens. See? It scores a point. So I want you to score yourself for your good behavior, for each 15 minutes of good behavior. Are you going to do what? Tell me what you're going to do.
I'm gonna give you a point every time the kitchen bell rings if I don't fight and give my mom a bad time.
Right. Good. That's right. For your studying, I'm going to give your mom an egg timer. We'll talk to her about that in a little while. Once David has been instructed in how to regulate his own behavior, it's important to explain the program to the parents so they can begin reinforcing him for carrying out the self-regulation procedures. Studying at home, and he'll use this egg timer to keep track of when he's been studying. And each time all the sand runs out,
make a plus, David. Make a plus sign right there, just like that. You do it. That's right. Now, if you have not been behaving well, if you've been fighting with Teresa, or you've been arguing with your mom and dad, and the bell goes ding, then just make a
0.
just a line like that.
Minus.
It's called a minus sign.
It's better than...
Now you'll see that David has the wrist counter. You can show your mom and dad that, David. And he's going to use that to keep track of his provocative behavior and fighting, physical aggression. Now the way we'll do it is you can take this kitchen timer home and set it on 15 minutes. And when the timer dings, if David hasn't been fighting with anybody during that 15 minutes, or he's not been provoking, he'll give himself a click. Right, David? And what else will you do? What do you do with the check sheet when the timer goes ding? Remember, you put an X, you put a plus if you've been behaving well.
Yeah.
I mean a plus sign, or a minus if you've been fighting with Teresa or giving your mom and dad a rough time, and then you wouldn't press your clicker. And then you reset the timer again for the next 15 minutes, and just continue through David's waking hours at home. So he'll keep score on his counter of each 15 minutes he's been behaving well, and we'll record both the behaving well and then misbehaving times. Really what this does is it lets us know how many times you've timed him. If we just kept track of the pluses only, you may have done it for only 1 hour, you may have done it all day long, and it doesn't let us know whether his behavior is really changing or whether the different scores from day to day are merely a function of the different amounts of time that he's been scoring. Do you have any questions about that?
Yes. Now, is this only at home, or when we go to somebody else's house, or?
Say for now, only at home.
Only at home.
And the wrist counter should not be taken to school. We'll try to arrange something else for school, but this is just a program for at-home behavior. It could include like in the yard, in the neighborhood. But if you're going visiting, for now, let's say not. Any other questions? David will also take over the tracking of his own homework behavior, and he will use an hourglass to indicate each 3 minutes that have passed, and then score himself on a check sheet when the 3 minutes are up. In order to encourage David to score his own behavior, he and I agreed that he would call my office each day and report his points to my secretary. For each day that he calls the office, my secretary recorded 1 point, and we had agreed that after he had accumulated 50 points, he could keep the wrist counter permanently.
Child Development Center, Mrs. Bach speaking. Well, hi, David. Okay. Studying 6. Seven plus for fighting. 1 minus. Okay. Thanks, David. Goodbye.
Several weeks have gone by with David working on his self-regulation program. Hi, Miss Norwood.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you? The time had come for us all to sit down and evaluate the progress and problems that had occurred during this period of time. The film indicates that David has made progress both in reducing his provocative behavior and in increasing his studying time. Mr. Norwood? At this point, we may decide to go on to some of the other target problems that the mother had listed when she first came to the center. David, since I've been seeing you and your mother, This graph here is for your aggression and provocative behavior. These are from all the scores.
Provocative.
This is like teasing and fighting and stuff
Oh,
like
now
that.
I see.
This is a record of all of that that's been happening. And this up here is a record of the studying that you've done at home. And the higher...
What's that?
Well, you finally reached your 50 points. And you earned the counter, so now you get to keep the counter.
This one?
Yeah. Mrs. Norwood, what have you seen happen during the time we've been working together?
Well, I think David's a little more positive when I tell him to do something. He's more apt to do it right then than 3 or 4 times. Might happen to tell him 3 or 4 times.
Mr. Norwood, I wonder if you can tell me what's happened with David since we've been working together on his behavior.
Well, he's been doing somewhat better in school. He's still not perfect, but he's been doing better and much better around the house.
What are your thoughts about the self-regulation program?
Well, it makes him more conscious of what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He concentrates a little harder now than he did before. And if he makes a mistake, instead of just quitting, he'll, continue on and try.
David has been learning not to be so provocative with his peers. As his provocative behavior has decreased, he has gotten more positive reactions from his sister and from other children in his neighborhood.
I think these are both very good demonstrations of some initial steps in setting up the kinds of behavior which we engage in when we control ourselves, behaviors which were sadly lacking in these 2 cases, but which you can see in the film can be introduced.